Warning, the following material is extremely disturbing. On Grave Matter, we try to be as accurate as possible and we collect information from many different sources. We don't condone or glorify murder, and we try to be as sensitive as possible to victims and their families while approaching a serious subject matter with a sense of humor. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for episode 5 of The Grave Matter. Chris is going to start today. We're going to talk about Angel Resendiz, the railroad killer.
Super famous.
Yeah, pretty gnarly guy. I've seen a little bit on him, but I'm going to learn some stuff today, I think.
Yeah.
He was not gentle.
No.
And he was rather successful in his career, as far as I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into it. Go ahead and tell me some stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm super excited to talk about this guy. His full real name is Angel Resendiz. Although he was known by several different aliases, and I thought it was interesting when I first started researching this dude to know that he had gone by 9 different aliases until I saw the FBI most wanted list that eventually came to light, and he had like 90 different names on there. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of this guy, and if not, then you're going to want to stay tuned and listen up, because this is a hell of a case.
I feel like Maturino means something in Spanish.
I think
name.
I mean, the only thing I could think would be Matador.
Better know.
I don't know, but feel free to look it up while I'm going through this. Angel Resendiz was known as the Railway Killer. Most commonly is also referred to the rail car killer and the railroad killer. Basically, this dude bounced around Mexico, the United States, and Canada, supposedly, using our train system.
He got around.
He sure did. Yeah, he really did. He has at least murdered 15 people, but possibly up to 23 and maybe even more. This took place in the 1990s all around, but a lot of it is really focused on here in Texas, which is why we're kind of talking about it right now. He had an interesting MO a lot of the times, and some FBI profilers, one of the big one, Don Clark, which was in charge of the investigation in Houston, talked about his different levels of motivation, that he had 3 different primary levels of motivation. He had a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary level of motivation. And initially, he just wanted to rob people, supposedly.
Yeah, I was going to say monetary is usually on that list.
Yeah, so it was money, jewelry, and food, right? Because he was kind of like, he was a transient, he was like a
Drifter.
homeless dude. Yeah. And then if somebody wound up being in the house, he had a secondary motivation to murder them. And if they wound up being attractive, his tertiary motivation was to rape them. So kind of interesting how they came up with that.
So he decided who he was going to rape based on how attractive they were to him, and not just like as a power thing. He didn't just rape everybody.
No, it was not correct. Yeah, so He would break into random homes. And, you know, some of these people were 26 years old and pretty attractive, and some of these people were 86 years old. And
I would have been in so much trouble.
Damn. He had a very interesting thought process, I think, the way that he went through this. And he even talked about, the devil being a part of him. And when you look into his eyes, if you Google this guy, you see some of the courtroom images, and you're just like, yeah, there's no soul in this guy. And I'm a ginger, so for me to say that, I mean, that means something, right?
Yeah, it's kind of Night Stalker-ish. I mean,
yeah.
He had the same deal going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, just a little bit about this guy. His name's Angel. He was born in Puebla, Mexico on August 1st.
Certainly was no angel, though.
I was going to say, could his mom have been any further off with like a name? You know what I mean? Although he did eventually claim that he was half angel, half man.
Oh, the rantings of a madman.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. Well, they
Angel of
determined
what?
that he wasn't mad, so which is why he was executed eventually. But we'll get into that. A few things about this guy. He was born August 1st, 1959 in Puebla, Mexico, and eventually surrendered, which is one of the most interesting parts of this case, is in my opinion, because I can't imagine why this dude would do that. He says he was lied to, but we'll we'll see.
So was he arrested first, and then, or did he just walk into a police station and say, "Hey, this is"?
Even crazier, he surrendered coming into the United States from Mexico on the international bridge in Del Rio, Texas, to a Texas Ranger, Agent Carter, which is the only person he said he would ever talk to for whatever reason. I mean, multiple agencies were involved at this point. The FBI was involved, U.S. Customs, the Border Patrol, several local police forces, the Texas Rangers, and this is the only dude he trusted.
That's odd, and that's certainly not a good thing to say when you're trying to enter another country.
Yeah, yeah, and it was
come back to kill some more of your citizens.
It was a super crazy surrender, and to me, I find that one of the most interesting parts about this case because as it builds up and as he's found out, this is the end of the road. We're talking about, and it's. I can't imagine. I've never, been a serial killer, but I can't imagine wanting to turn myself in.
Spoiler alert.
In Harris County, Texas, for capital murder. I can't. They've murdered. They've put to death more people than any other county in the United States, Houston. So I don't know what he thought was going to happen.
Houston is a reoccurring trend in our podcast, I think.
Yeah, it sure is.
Which we eventually will branch out.
We'll see. You guys got a lot of shit going on, all right?
Yeah, there's just so much material right here.
Really.
Home, so.
And it's not only Houston for this guy. So he was all over the place. Georgia, Ohio, California, potentially a lot in Texas, Kentucky. He was all over the fucking place, right? So Illinois. He had some really strange tendencies, this guy. And I thought it was super interesting because if you want to be a smart serial killer and have a body count like this dude in the 20s or something like that, you feel like you would have to be smart in order to not get caught. He was not smart at all. This guy had the weirdest tendencies. He, first of all, seemed very possessed. He admitted that he was possessed. He said, "I'm so sorry." When he was about to be executed, he said, "I'm so sorry. I ask for forgiveness. I know that I allowed the devil to rule my life." And he really did. He would do some crazy shit that the investigators have never seen. This guy, one of his things, he had some weird calling cards, as I would say. One thing he would do is after he would kill a person, he would stay in their house for hours, which is super rare for a kill. Most of the time it's you dump the body, you get the hell out of there, right? Which we talked about last episode, right? So he would stay there. He would go through their personal items. He always would study their driver's license and figure out who the people were, and he would display their driver's license in a very specific fashion. He would eat fruit almost at every single one of these crime scenes. He would eat a plum halfway and set it down. He would steal jewelry and money, which he later gifted to his family in Mexico, which is totally nuts. But he seemed like he wanted to learn about his victims. It wasn't just, it was very methodical, you know what I mean? He wanted to learn about his victims. He didn't care about being careful, like DNA and stuff like that. He had fingerprints everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, there's blood, there's fingerprints. He didn't give a shit. He was fine with it.
Well, if he'd never been arrested before, then his...
he'd been arrested several times.
Oh, well, maybe they've never taken his DNA.
He had been deported from the United States 4 times at this point.
Oh, fucking swell.
Yeah. Super weird. However, we'll find out later, or right now, is because I'm going to say it, that the...
You try to do it again.
Try to do it again, guys.
Pull
Work
out your
with
later.
me. We'll talk about that a little bit later in our own backyard here in Texas. But his DNA is how he wound up getting caught later, right? So, but let's do this. I want to go ahead and I want to dive into his victims. I always like talking about the victims and how that went down. There's really 16 I'm going to go over kind of briefly, and 2 that I really want to focus on. This all started in 1986, so it was a while ago. This was in Bexar County. This is in San Antonio, or right outside of San Antonio. There was a couple killed, but not together. They were killed separately, which was super interesting. So there was a girlfriend figure that wound up being shot 4 times with a .38 caliber weapon. And he admitted to this later in 2001. He said that, I picked her up from a homeless shelter, which is a wonderful place to pick up, a girlfriend. And he took her on a motorcycle ride, but shortly after she disrespected him, he decided to shoot her 4 times and kill her. So he wasn't going to put up with that. And then
it's a harsh punishment.
Yeah, it is, And also, not only that, but he went back to kill her boyfriend. Apparently, she had talked about her boyfriend, and he decided to kill that gentleman too, which he later said that it was because he was practicing black magic and he was trying to protect
As one does.
As one does. He confessed in 2001 to these in order to try and speed up his execution, which it didn't. But those were the first two victims, 1986 in San Antonio, Texas. Now we fast forward to number 3. That's another thing I say. Fast forward a lot, and it's timeline oriented. Whatever. Michael White. He was 22 years old, also from San Antonio, Texas, and this was the first time that he had beaten somebody to death with a brick, which he claimed was for that guy being a homosexual. Which was also admitted later. But then we come into a really interesting thing here, an interesting time frame. There's a 6-year gap. Nothing happens for 6 years, which is a shitload of time for a serial killer, right? I mean, with the exception of a couple, right? Who took the 40-year break?
I don't know if it was 40 years, but it was the Golden State Killer. He went a pretty decent amount of time while his kids were
the
young.
Golden State Killer.
Yeah. So do we know where Angel was at this time? Did they have any idea where he was? They just know he wasn't killing? Or?
During the 6-year gap?
Yeah.
So they have no idea, right?
So
Until right before he's executed and he admits it. And we'll talk about that a little later. No, I'm just kidding. So he does. He admits.
Tell me now.
He says that during the 6-year break, he had gone back home to Mexico.
I knew it. That was my suggestion.
And he had killed 7 people during that time frame. So.
Yeah, so we don't know what the hell he's doing over there. I mean, we don't.
Right.
That's exactly what my mind went to immediately.
Because when the police started connecting the dots, they said, well, there's no way this guy took a break. You know what I mean? He said, no, I went back home and I killed people there.
Yeah. Because
it was more convenient. So they said, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So we go then to Ocala, Florida, 1997, right? It's a big break.
Yeah.
And we have victims number 4 and 5. Jesse Howell, who was only 19 years old, and his 16-year-old fiance, which I think is kind of strange that they put that in there. But, it's Florida, Jill. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
Not too bad. 23 to 26, 36 to 39. But 16 to 19, I don't know.
I mean, it's only 3 years. Yeah. But, yeah, whatever. But anyway, she's listed as his fiance. So they were both killed. Ocala, Florida, on March 23rd of 1997.
I just want to grab her and be like, finish high school.
You're worth so much more than this.
You have your whole life ahead of you. You're going to wind up pregnant before you even go to college, and it'll never happen.
Yeah.
Carry on. So that's not directed to anybody specifically.
Yeah.
It sounds like something my parents might say to me. I don't know.
Yeah, or me. I don't know. I'm not in danger of getting pregnant, but
get together.
I mean, God only knows. Who knows? Number 6, possibly number 6, was way out of the way. This was in Colton, California, but it was in a rail yard. But it was a transient. It was like a homeless guy that was murdered, and he was beaten in the rail yard to death, and he was considered the prime suspect for this. But where it really gets crazy is when we start talking about number 7 and what would have been number 8. So number 7 is Christopher Meyer. Who was out with his girlfriend, Holly Dunn, not to be confused with the country star.
I think I saw a TV show about this.
She's on I Survived.
I Survived, yeah.
She's on I Survived. She's on like 48 Hours. I Did It. She has a book out, a website, a foundation that she's founded. She is considered the only survivor of the railway killer.
She went through some shit, and it wasn't for lack of trying. I think he tried to kill her, thought she was...
He fucked her up.
He thought she was dead or
that
she would be soon, and...
Yeah, so the way that went down, this took place on August 29th of 1997 in Lexington, Kentucky. And their boyfriend and girlfriend, right? Chris and Holly. And Chris, which is very much like me, Chris, a very nice guy. He's about 6 feet tall. He's very skinny. This is back before I gained a little bit of weight, you know what I mean? It sounds like me, you know what I mean? Super nice guy. They were at a college party, and they went for a walk. It was next to the train tracks, so they went for a walk on the train tracks, and they sat down and talked for a little while. There was another couple with them. They were all chilling there, and which makes me wonder. Yeah, you went for a walk to talk, huh? Yeah, bullshit. You guys weren't smoking bud or anything, right? Whatever.
They were flattening coins on the railroad.
Yeah,
that is what they said.
Yeah, I heard that. And they were like, "But no trains came." And I was like, "Whatever. You guys were smoking weed. Everybody knows it." So, anyways, the first couple leaves, and then Holly and Chris are still there, and as they're getting up to leave, not only it's just when they get up to leave. there's a man that appears behind a electrical box that he's been sitting there the whole time listening to him.
Ooh, that's creepy that he
Yeah.
was just there hanging out.
He was just there the whole time, and he had a black bag in his hand, which was, they didn't know what was in it, but they thought maybe it was a gun. He had an ice pick in his other hand, which they got a little concerned. He walked.
It's ominous.
Holly later said that the guy knew exactly what he was doing because Angel's only like 5'5". He's like a small Mexican dude. He really is. He's not buff. He's not like, I heard he was strong, but he's not intimidating looking at all, right? But he had an ice pick with him. Chris is 6 feet tall, and he immediately goes for Chris, puts him on his knees, ties him up, as Holly's just kind of dumbstruck and in shock. And then
He just wanted to isolate the threat, which it sounds like
Exactly.
Chris wasn't very much of a threat anyway. According to Holly, he was
right. No,
real-
he wasn't. He wasn't a fighter at all. But this dude didn't know that, and so he just knew what he was doing. He went for the threat first, right? And that's what he did. He tied him up. He wound up tying Holly up immediately afterwards with a belt behind her back, and he talked with them for a long time. He he was like asking their names and what they did, and do you guys have any money? I need a car, da 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 da. And they were like, yeah, here's everything. And he was like, nah, I don't need that. I'm waiting on my friend. Just kind of insanity. These things that didn't make sense, he kept saying. He would walk up to the train tracks and then walk back down to where they were and just be like, all right. And then split-second decision, things change. This guy picks up a 100-pound rock. I mean, Holly said he was struggling to carry it, and walks over to Chris and just drops it on his head, just instantly. And immediately there's blood everywhere, and Holly goes into shock, and she's like, what the hell is going on here? What the hell is going on? This is really happening. And she goes, please turn. She starts hearing him gurgle on his own blood. And she's like, please turn his head. Please turn his head. And he obliges her. He's like, that's fine. He goes over there, and he turns his head, and he goes, you know what? Don't worry about him. He's gone. He's already gone. Don't
Wow.
worry about him. And he proceeds to rape her. So he has the ice pick in his hand, and he starts to take her pants off, and she starts fighting him. And he stabs her in the neck, and he goes, look how easily I could kill you. And she stops fighting. He proceeds to rape her, and she says she doesn't remember like a whole lot of it. She doesn't remember the feeling of being stabbed in the neck. She doesn't remember the feeling of being raped. It was just so much adrenaline, I imagine, going
Sounds
through
like
her
a
body.
blessing to me.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Your body really takes care of you
as her
sometimes.
boyfriend's dead right
Yeah.
next to her. You know what I mean? Unreal. And so she says, well, I thought I started gaining his trust. We told each other our names and a little bit of our stories, and I asked him to put my pants back on so that if they found me, I wouldn't be naked.
Yeah.
And he did it. He was like, that's fine. And he was like, she's like, oh, I'm gonna get away now. Something's gonna, I'm gonna wind up leaving with him, and I'm gonna have to escape or something like that. But I've gained his trust. The next thing you know, he disappears for a second. He comes back with a giant piece of wood. Just imagine like a 12-foot like 2x4, and he just beats the crap out of her. Immediately starts smacking her in the face with it 4 or 5 times. Dislocates her jaw, breaks her, collapses her eye socket, and she puts her hand up, and he shatters her fucking wrist. She turns over, and then he hits her in the back of the head about 5 more times until she said her breathing was so shallow that he thought she was dead.
Or die, yeah.
Yeah, and so he was like, fuck it, and he left. She gets up. She's alive, barefoot, stepping on broken glass. She says she doesn't remember exactly how it unfolded, but she wound up going to a person's house, just like a random house. She's like, I don't remember walking there, but I remember being there. I walked into the house and just screamed, call 911, call 911, call 911. Paramedics came, and she was in the hospital for 4 days. She survived.
It makes you wonder why he didn't use the ice pick he brought with him to, I mean, that's...
His thing was beating people, That was his thing. As you'll see with a lot of these other murders, that he just seemingly enjoyed beating people.
So he just used it to threaten and subdue them, and then he killed them the way he preferred.
Right.
But I remember her saying something about how she was thanking him for, I can't remember exactly, but he put her somewhere, covered her up, and she was thanking him for that. Like, I don't remember the
It
exact
might have just been her
circumstance.
pants.
I don't remember, but she was telling him, thank you for not killing me. Thank you for not killing me. And he was totally under the impression that he had or whatever. And then, yeah. It's
Right before he beat her, probably.
Yeah, it's really terrible.
Yeah.
Details.
But she wound up getting help, and she becomes a huge part of the case later down the road. So I'm not sure. She wound up, starting a charity called Holly's House in Evansville, Indiana, where she's from. And even more than that, she's written a book. It's called Soul Survivor. It's available on Amazon or her website, hollykdunn.com. And she's a public speaker. It's apparently she's very successful and just a really, really strong woman.
Can you just imagine the brick shit level of those people who she busted into their house? Like, she didn't knock or anything. She just opened the door and walked in, bleeding.
Yeah.
Seriously
Covered in
injured. Mm-hmm. That is a different evening than they probably had planned for their family.
I can only imagine.
I mean, they were going to watch some.
It was 2:30 in the morning is when it happened.
Oh,
too,
yeah. That ain't Santa Claus.
Mm-hmm. No kidding, right? So a whole year goes by, and they don't know who this guy is. A year goes by, and this is remember, that was in Kentucky. Now we're back in Texas. This is Hughes Springs, Texas, which is a small little town. On October 4th of 1998, and an 87-year-old female named Leafy Mason is bludgeoned to death. She actually had a collection of like antique flat irons.
Oh, hell.
And so he beat her with one until she died. In 87 years, I can't even imagine. Like, you think you're done at that point. That's the last thing you think is going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're just chilling out and like watching QVC. And
like, she's seen some shit, you know?
And collecting your irons online. And
collecting that iron and Social Security.
Wow. That's pretty awful.
Yeah, that's October of 98. A couple months later, there's another victim, Fanny Byers. 81-year-old female in Georgia, Carl, Georgia. She was beaten with a tire rim. So very similar.
Tire rim?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like from a car, a tire rim?
Yeah.
Those are heavy and awkward and...
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so...
What kind of shit? Like, he just came into her house with a tire rim? Like, he couldn't find a rock or... that's
or
just,
from the garage or something.
That's just a freaking odd choice to me.
Which is whatever was nearby.
I mean, nobody wants to haul around tire rims.
So he's used 2x4s, he's used bronze statues, pickaxes, bricks, the rock with Chris. Yeah. So whatever the weapon of availability.
I just can't even imagine somebody walking in and putting a fucking tire rim over their head and being like, "This is it."
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know. Maybe it was tire iron and they just put it wrong. I don't know. Either way, it wasn't a comfortable death.
Yeah.
Really. So that's Fanny Byers, 81 years old, 15 days before Christmas.
That's awful.
Of 1998.
I can't even help but think about like what her plans were, seeing her grandkids or her family for Christmas, and
Yeah.
having some fruit cake and chilling out and listening to Christmas carols. And then
it's terrible.
It's
and
fucking awful.
People are starting to get aware a little bit about what's going on, but there's not much recognition of a pattern yet. So,
well, he's all over the place. He moves from all these different places, and he uses a different weapon. And
he is. But the
it's
most common route that he takes is between San Antonio and Houston, which they start figuring out. So, only 7 days later, even closer to Christmas, December 17th of 1998, this guy goes into Houston. Well, West University Place, a subdivision of Houston. And he murders a 39-year-old female named Claudia Benton. This is the most crucial moment of his murders so far, because this is ultimately what's going to get him the death penalty, right? So Claudia Benton was a 39-year-old female. She was a doctor. She was a very renowned person in the community. She went to Baylor Medicine, which is where my dad went, in Houston, right? And it's a super well-respected medical school. And she didn't just go there. She taught there. She was a pediatric neurology researcher. And she had a huge presentation due the next day. Doctors don't usually miss that shit, you know what I mean? Yeah. So she didn't show up. And like 5 of her colleagues, all these doctors are calling the police, like, you got to go over there. And because, I hate to say it, but because she was like a white female doctor, they paid attention. And they went over, they did a welfare check, and they found her dead. She had been raped, stabbed, and beaten with a bronze statue. Not only did that happen, but this dude had opened her Christmas presents. He drank the milk.
What the hell?
He drank milk out of her fridge and left a trail of cookie crumbs. There was wrapping paper leading out the door.
Should have saved my Santa Claus joke.
Seriously, I mean, really, this was where it really happened. Yeah, she was married.
Stupid little elf.
Yeah, the Grinch. You know what I mean? Right. And she was married and had 2 daughters that were out of town. I think they were in Arizona at the time, and the detective had to call the husband and tell him. And initially, that guy was a suspect because he was so calm, George Benton, about the whole thing. But he was just in such shock that he couldn't believe it. They brought him back. They searched the house. He did say there was some jewelry missing, his stereo, and also her car, which was super obvious, but the police didn't know initially. So her Jeep was missing, which they found 7 days later in San Antonio. This is super important because he didn't have the key, so he hotwired the Jeep. And they found the steering column in the garage with his fingerprints on it. So the first time his fingerprints are entered into the database is right here. Also,
I can't help but think that maybe if he just looked for the keys, he had found them.
he looked for the keys on several occasions and didn't find them.
Well, they would have to be there, I would imagine.
Well,
if that's what the car was.
Yeah.
At her house.
I imagine, but,
Stupid ass.
Seriously. So this is Claudia Benton. They had the fingerprints were crucial, as well as a semen sample they got from her. Now, it didn't match anybody, but the DNA was entered into a database.
So that they could keep track of it.
So they could match it later,
yeah.
Right? Which is also extremely important. So when they tested the fingerprints, they had a match. And it was this random dude in the middle of Mexico named Rafael Resendiz Ramirez. And they were like, what the fuck? Like, this is some random guy in Mexico. He was wanted in Mexico for like assault and burglary, but nothing murder related. And they had also found out that he had been deported 4 times. And so at this point, they knew who they were looking for, but they just didn't know where he was.
Right.
And when they found her car in San Antonio 7 days later, fingerprints matched again. They were like, yeah, it's definitely this guy, whoever he is, wherever he is.
Shouldn't be a problem in San Antonio to find him.
Where's Mr. Resendiz Ramirez?
There has to be like 700 different Ramirez's and families in San Antonio.
I personally know like 700 Ramirez's in San Antonio. I mean, it's ridiculous. So it went quiet for a little while, but then you have murders 11 and 12. And this was in Weimar, Texas on May 2nd of 1999. So it's just, 5 months later or whatever. And
I've never heard of Weimar.
It's a little town to the west of Houston. Yeah, it's a little town, tons of churches, super religious town, old folks, little cute, quaint Texas town, right?
Fredericksburg of
Houston. Yeah. And no crime or anything like that. The next victims are Norman and Karen Cernick, 46 and 47 years old, and it's the fucking pastor of the church and his wife. I can't even imagine this. Everyone shows up for church on Sunday, and they're like, where's the pastor? And they're like, I don't know, his house is right there. Why don't you go knock on the door? Door's open. They're both dead in bed with fucking pickaxes in their head. Or wounds. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did use the pickaxe.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was a sledgehammer, not a pickaxe, a sledgehammer. Okay. So it was a sledgehammer. They're beating to death with a sledgehammer. At this point, people start freaking the fuck out. Nobody's safe, you know what I mean? They start making connections. People are putting bars on their window. Gun sales are skyrocketing. 911 calls are flooding into Chief Livingston and Weimar. It's unfucking believable.
Probably a ton of tips about strangers in town.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Someone's in my backyard. Da-da-da-da. People... The chief said he was so worried about police operations because occasionally you'd have to look for someone in somebody's backyard and people were coming out with guns going, who the fuck are you? And it's like, I'm a cop, dude. Like,
yeah.
But everyone was on edge. People were moving out of town. Families were sleeping in the same room. It got really, really intense. So he assured the community that nothing like this would ever. And he's like, well, it's a national serial killer. Probably it's not going to come back. No one goes back to the scene of the crime. This is in Weimar, Texas. So just a month later, almost a month and 2 days later, on June 4th of 99, there is a 26-year-old female named Noemi Dominguez who is a school teacher in Houston, Texas, who is hit with a pickaxe. That's the pickaxe. Murdered in her apartment. And not only that, but east of Houston, Fayette County, Texas, there is Josephine Convica on the same day, murdered with the same weapon, the same pickaxe. So this dude killed someone, hopped on a train a few miles out, bloody pickaxe the whole way, killed someone else. This chick was 73 years old, right?
I just wonder what his thought process is. Like, I think I'm ready to kill somebody else, or I feel like maybe
it's tough.
It's still early. Let's see what the next town brings, or
right, or how does he make that decision,
or like if he needed something specific, or he needed more money, or he didn't find what he wanted at the other place, or how does he choose which house? Does he look for people like the cars home during the day, or is he, are these all happening at night, or it's happening? You said that one's during the day, yeah?
No, it happened at night.
Okay.
The same 24 hours.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
It just
he did them all pretty much at night.
It makes you wonder like how lucky the next door neighbors feel, because it's like there's no rhyme or reason. He just picks a place. Yeah,
and they really started. Nobody had caught on before when the two pastors the pastor and his wife were killed. That's when they really caught on. They looked outside the window and a train rolled by, and they were like, how convenient would it be for someone to wait for a train to roll by, and then you kill the person as they're screaming, and you can't hear anything. And then they're like, well, what if they were on the train?
This would be the perfect time for the train near my house to just go through right now.
What?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you can hear it half a
You're
dozen
not
times
kidding.
a day.
Seriously, we'll edit that in there or something
Yeah.
to make it more interesting. So after number 14, Josephine Convica, which was the same day as Noemi Dominguez, or the same night, the FBI starts getting super involved. They find a relation to the Kentucky crime. They're like, this is the same guy as that killed Chris Meyer in Kentucky. And they start making all these connections. The media takes off. They wound up finding semen actually on the pastor's wife, Karen, and they put it into the database, and it matched Claudia Benton from Houston, Texas. Remember the first time they entered it?
Yeah.
And they said, oh shit, we got a fucking problem.
I wonder if they got a sample from Holly, because she was raped too.
Not that I know of. She hasn't mentioned that in any of the interviews. She's super active and does a lot of interviews, but I don't know. I don't know. She did go to the hospital immediately afterwards, but ultimately the match was made from Karen Cernick and Claudia Benton, which were, Weimar and Houston, Texas, so very close to each other. At this point, the FBI says, we have some issues. We need Don Clark, who's the main guy, and the agent in charge of this investigation, says we need additional resources. And they start throwing together this whole complicated scheme of how they're going to try and find this guy. They comb the tracks. They developed Operation Train Stop, which is the least clever name I've ever heard of, because that's exactly what it was. They just stopped the trains, but they only
Operation Find This Killer Guy.
Operation Find the Murderer.
Yeah.
They passed out flyers at the Border Patrol. They searched homeless shelters, and what they did is they stopped the trains going from San Antonio to Houston, because they kept finding vehicles near San Antonio.
He's leapfrogging back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. So they were like, okay, well, it looks like he's going to San Antonio, hopping on the train, riding out east. And so they searched all those tracks. They found 24 illegal immigrants. They found all sorts of drugs, and they never found anything this dude. And they even asked the immigrants, have you guys seen this dude? And they were like, no, I've never heard of him. So, who knows? They didn't really get anywhere with that. And then you have 2 additional murders, and this is way out of the way. This is in this is a father and daughter.
The train.
Yeah. Watch the fuck out.
The train's coming.
The murderer's coming. The murderer's coming.
Flashback.
Right. So we have our last 2 victims, 15 and 16. This is George Morber, who's an 80-year-old male who lives in Gorham, Illinois. And he's with his daughter, Carolyn Frederick, who's a 52-year-old female. He shoots him in the back of the head with a shotgun. The shotgun malfunctions as the girl screams, and he beats her to death with the shotgun. Yeah, so really, really terrible way. Shit for both of them, but, in my opinion, especially for her. This was on June 15th of 1999, and this was the last big thing. The FBI at this point had about fucking had it. That's when I was saying Don Clark called in, and he said, we need additional resources. They put him on the FBI's top 10. Okay? This is in 1999. You know who else is on the top 10? Who? Osama bin Laden. Okay?
Oh, shit,
yeah, so he's up there with... Bro, he made it. You know what I mean? He's also, because of that, he's offered a $125,000 reward. And because it's so new, it's on national news programs all over the country. Agent Don Clark stated that he would like to get the media and the public involved in order to shut down as many avenues as possible for this guy to travel. Right?
I just imagine him sitting in somebody's house or apartment after he's just murdered them and eating fucking cheese crackers and watching himself on the news.
He liked to eat plums, and he made toast.
Plums and toast. This is very specific. Mm-hmm. All right.
Almost always fruit.
He would have been, I guess, all I got is watermelon right now. So
I guess we're safe.
Yeah. Go ahead and leave the doors open tonight. Might as well.
Right. So the FBI, everyone gets involved in this case, and all of a sudden everybody's paying attention. And the FBI, and throughout all my research, I could never find exactly what this lead was, but it said that they followed an unknown lead to Mexico that led to his birth certificate. Somebody showed his birth certificate, and this guy's freaking Angel Resendiz. He was born here and he lives here.
What was his other name that he went by?
Rafael Resendiz Ramirez was the one that was posted on the FBI most wanted list. But if you look at the most wanted list, it's got all this fine print at the bottom, and it's all names that he went by.
Jesus.
It's like Carlos Rodriguez, William Eduardo, Daniel Hernandez, all these.
The fucking toast eater.
Yeah, the toast eater, right?
Plum crazy man.
Yeah, plum bum. So, They followed these leads on his birth certificate and eventually led him to Rodeo, Mexico. And everybody, they started questioning people in the town, and everyone's like, oh, it's Angel. Like, everyone fucking knew him. They're like, yeah, it's Angel. He's a family guy. He's got a wife and kid here or whatever. Like, I don't know if he had a kid. He had a wife. I think he did have a kid, but he had a wife for sure. Like, yeah, he goes to the United States sometimes, and they were like, we know.
We're well aware of that. Let me see. Does he take a train?
Does he take a train? Right. So they started questioning his wife, and they found all this jewelry and stuff that she had, and he was like, yeah, he gave me all this jewelry from his trips to the United States, and they were like, funny thing, let us confiscate that. And
I know it's the only thing you probably have. We're going to take that.
Yeah, and they did. I thought about that. How do you confiscate someone's stuff in Mexico? But they did. And it was identified later by the victims' families as the victims' jewelry. Something super frustrating is during that operation that the FBI had set up, they had passed out flyers at the border. And they were like, if you catch this guy, let us know, right? Well, guess who fucking caught that guy? The United States Border Patrol, and had him in custody and fucking let him go. Right before the last 3 victims were killed, because at the time the Border Patrol computers were not linked with the FBI computers. So, I get it at the time, but at the same time, it's like, fuck, dude, you guys had flyers and everything, But he was apparently really good at changing his appearance, haircuts and different glasses and stuff like that. And he's like, no, I'm just, Paco Ramirez or whatever. And they're like, all right, fuck it, whatever, go ahead, let him go. However, they did find out from his wife that he had a sister that he was pretty close with in New Mexico. A sister, I think it was a sister-in-law. Or maybe it was a stepsister or something like that.
Oh, that's like me and you.
Pretty much, yeah. But, you won't rat me out to the cops, right?
Okay.
So, he was hiding. Damn, that was the most confident, just kidding, okay, I've ever heard. So, she said, they initially contacted her and they said, do you have any contact with this dude with Angel? And she was like,
oh, Angel from Old Mexico? This is New Mexico.
Old Mexico Angel? No, haven't heard of that dude. No, she didn't deny it, but she was like, yeah, it's my brother, but I haven't heard from him in a couple years, I've heard from him, but very sparsely. I have no idea what he's doing.
Lying-ass hussy.
And nobody believed that he would commit that kind of crime. Everyone, his wife back in Mexico, they were like, yeah, he goes there, but he would never do that. His sister's like, nah, no way.
Funny thing, serial killers tend to be pretty good at fucking hiding that shit.
Yeah, they did. They hit it. Who'd have thunk, right?
It's called compartmentalization.
Is it?
Yeah. Learn a new word today?
Yeah, absolutely. So eventually she starts talking to the detective team that's been put on her case and assigned to her as a contact. And she goes, all right, I'm in contact with him. He is considering a surrender because he is afraid of being killed by bounty hunters in Mexico. Because in Mexico, it's dead or alive. They don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And it's like 125,000 American, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're like, he's like,
payday.
I could turn myself in and have a chance at life in prison, or I'm going to get murdered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
it's amazing he didn't have like his sister or his wife turn him in so they could collect the bounty.
What an idiot. No, but they did organize a pretty complicated surrender. So she had admitted that she was in contact with him and that he was in hiding safely in Mexico somewhere. Eventually, they agreed to surrender. And they said, well, when's this going to go down? And she says, well, tomorrow morning. And they were like, fucking bullshit. This guy's going to turn himself in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they said, no, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., he will cross the border and you can meet him on the international bridge and arrest him. And sure enough, 9 a.m. the next morning, here comes Angel fucking Resendiz Ramirez, whatever you want to call him. Angel
I wonder
Resendiz.
what he did the night before. I'm just wondering, like, how he spent his last 3 hours. It's like,
yeah.
Did he go to bed early, or was he like, let's go see what I can get into?
He was dressed okay, you know what I mean, when he showed up. He was with his brother.
Gonna get up and shower and shave, have a Coke and a smiling.
He definitely didn't shave.
Turn himself in.
He did not look, and one of the reporters said, I fully expected to see somebody completely beat down and in hiding, like, and he was completely confident in a silk shirt and like didn't seem affected by it at all. So on one side of the bridge you had Angel Resendiz and his brother coming across, and on the other side of the bridge you had his sister from New Mexico, a Texas Ranger, and a priest.
This is a family reunion?
Yeah, and it kind of was, and they met in the middle. The Texas Ranger, Agent Carter, shook his hand and placed him in handcuffs.
Gotcha.
It was very what's the word I'm looking for? It was very
efficient by the books.
uneventful. Something like that, yeah. So whatever, we'll say things were very uneventful. It was very quick, but the amount of relief was felt all over the southern United States, especially Texas. And that was on July 13th of 1999. My daddy's coming home July 13th.
What is that?
Con Air. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I think it's like 16th or whatever, but whatever. So this is just outside of El Paso. Immediately he boards a plane and he is flown to Houston, Texas. The news guys are waiting there.
The news guys?
The news guys.
Like the
media.
reporters or whatever?
Yeah. The reporters. And there's tons of pictures of this guy. And
We're the bad news bears.
the bad news bears. And these are the people that were like, oh, he looked completely unfazed by being arrested and being in this situation. This guy at the time, they knew that, the prosecutors knew that he was responsible for at least 9 murders, right?
Yeah.
And they weren't sure how they were going to approach it at first, so they decided to go with the strongest evidence, which was the case of Claudia Benton, the doctor, which is why that victim was so important, right? So what they did is they said, we're going to charge you with the murder of Dr. Claudia Benton because you were breaking and entering. You were committing a felony while you murdered her. It's a capital murder, which is punishable by death.
So they just wanted
In
like the
Harris County.
heaviest hitting crime, and then they would
Yeah.
charge him with the rest later.
Well,
after
they were all
secured
pretty
him.
heavy hitting, but it was whatever had the most evidence, right?
Right.
So his fingerprints were tied in her. They were found in her garage and on her stolen car in San Antonio, as well as semen. So he was pretty fucked, right? It took the jury like 30 minutes. He was absolutely found guilty and sentenced to death, which he flipped out about. Surprisingly, I don't know how he thought anything was going to go different. Like we said, Harris County, which is Houston, Texas, has killed more people than any other county in the United States as far as lethal injection and executions, right? And we all know about death row in Texas with Huntsville and people getting killed there. So he faced court on May 8th of 2000. He faced the evidence, and his lawyers straight up, they were like, yeah, man, he's guilty. Even his lawyers, they were like, he's guilty, but he's absolutely insane. He's
Not so much.
He's schizophrenic.
I'm looking at his mugshot right now, and
Is this the one with the hair and the beard?
it feels like his name should be like
okay.
Dirty Sanchez. Like seriously.
That one does
He
look like Dirty
looks-
Sanchez, but look at some of the other pictures. He changes quite a bit.
yeah. There he looks like a sensei.
That's the one. That's the one I'm talking about. He looks like the fucking devil. There's no emotion in his eyes. They're black. They're pits of hell, man. That's crazy.
He just looks like
No remorse.
he
He looks mad that he can't do it right now.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
He looks like he trains people in jiu-jitsu or something.
Yeah. So May 8th, the year 2000, he faced all the evidence and he claimed insanity. The jury didn't fucking buy it for a second. He was immediately found guilty and sentenced to death, which he was fucking pissed about because he was like, if I turned myself in, you guys promised me that I wouldn't be put to death.
Whoops.
Yeah.
That's our bad.
Funny thing about Texas, Angel.
Yeah, they don't give a shit.
Yeah, we really don't, bro. You've turned yourself into the wrong place.
That's like what was it, BTK? Was it BTK that asked the police, if I send you a floppy disk, you can't trace me, right? And they're like, absolutely not.
Yeah, and
And then he sent it, and they put that shit in the computer, and they're like, oh, look, it's Dennis Rader
well, how about that?
at the damn church. Let's go to the church now. Maybe he's there.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
And they're like,
huh?
oh, he's like, oh, you lied to me. And they're like, yeah, we got you. And he's like, you got me.
Ridiculous the amount of intelligence on these people sometimes. So
Or
both
lack
on both ends
thereof.
of the spectrum.
That's true.
So this guy was, he was found guilty. And once he was in custody and found guilty, things changed a little bit. He admitted to everything. He admitted to 15.
Well, they can't kill him twice, so he's probably just like, whatever.
Well, that's the thing. That's why they went for Claudia Benton first. They said, if we can convict him on this and it's a death penalty, you don't charge anybody after they've received the death penalty. You're not going to kill him sooner. You know what I mean? That's it. He's done.
Especially here, like they sure take their time.
Get in
sometimes.
line, brother. Yeah. So he was found guilty and sentenced to death. He was I think it was 7 years. 6 or 7 years that he was in the Polunsky unit in Livingston, Texas, which we have a bunch of family nearby.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Allen B. Polunsky unit, and then he was, of course, transferred to Huntsville and executed on June 27th of 2006. He was pronounced dead at 8:05 p.m. His last words kind of contradict his insanity plea. If you if you want my opinion, because he turns into the window. He looks at all the victims' families, George Benton, which is Dr. Benton's husband, and he says, I know what I've done is wrong. I apologize. I ask you to forgive me, even though you don't have to. I allowed the devil to rule my life, and you don't deserve the pain, and I don't deserve to live. That seems completely sane to me.
Yeah.
I mean, but he, and he also, and it's questionable because he also said that he was half man, half angel, and that it was impossible to execute him because he was eternal. And so is he just saying that to
Hold
try
our
and,
beer.
You know what I mean? Is he just saying that to try and get away with what he's done?
I mean, it wasn't long after they proved that he was full of shit about the immortal part anyway.
Yeah, he definitely died.
Yeah. Hey, guess what?
But was he sane enough to execute?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did it. I think so.
Yeah.
Personally, I think he was just bullshitting and he was a bad liar. But, it was an absolute fucking monster, and he was taken off the streets. Thank God that people can rest easy. He killed pastors. I mean, that's something else. You know what I mean?
How'd he eat it? What'd they do? How'd they kill him?
Lethal injection. Just took 3 or 4 minutes. And, they were led into the chamber at 7:45, and he was pronounced dead at 8:05.
I wonder why they didn't bring a rock into the room. I would have made him at least think.
You know what I mean? Just at least
I'd
carry
be like,
it.
hey, time to die. Here's a cinder block. And you'd be like, wait a minute, what? We do things a little different in Texas,
Seriously. Well, this guy's super famous, and he was all over the place. FBI top 10 for a while. And, it's just a miracle that they were able to catch this guy and lock him away and put him to death. And it's just creepy. Look at the pictures of this dude, and you don't see the remorse in his eyes. And one of the craziest parts about the trial, I didn't mention this earlier, Holly Dunn showed up at Claudia Benton's trial. And they questioned her, and it fucking tore him up. And it tore her up, just being in the room with the guy. And they said, because she hadn't looked at him the whole time. And they said, can you please tell us what that gentleman's wearing? And she looked at him and had a freaking meltdown and was like, he's wearing a white button-up shirt. And he just looked at her like how fucking dare you? You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah. And
do we know where he was from in Mexico?
Yeah, he's from Puebla, Mexico.
I don't know much about Puebla, Mexico.
Me neither, but that's where he's from.
Yeah.
Puebla, and then his family was in Rodeo.
Huh.
Durango.
I just feel like you're saying words now.
Horchata. I'm just kidding. I don't know. So, he's from.
Dun, dun.
So he was actually born in Chorizo, Mexico.
Tequila.
And that's the story, man. That's the story of how he got caught, how frightened everybody was, the gruesome things that he did, how he bludgeoned people to death and had no remorse for it.
I gotta say, I don't think we've been friends with him.
Not personally.
No.
I'm not a huge fan, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is that back in Puebla, everyone was like, it's Angel. Yeah, man. What's going on with Angel? And they were like, I just killed a bunch of people. And they were like, what?
No,
no
not
way.
Angel.
They absolutely refused to believe it. Yeah, so super interesting. That really about wraps it up for this week. Where we're going to talk about Angel and the crazy shit that he did. So we really appreciate you guys joining us for another wonderful episode of The Grave Matter, episode 5, Angel Resendiz. What do we got coming next week, Jill?
Next week, I think we're doing Tommy Lynn Sells.
Tommy Lynn. And the Broomstick Killer.
Yeah.
Which
There's
is gonna
time.
be, yeah.
Those are a couple big names already.
Yeah, they are. So we might have to split that up. We'll see. But, we really appreciate you guys joining us once again. Check us out on our Facebook and our Instagram.
I hope there are a lot more of you today than there were last week.
For real. Who knows? We are at The Grave Matter and thegravematter.com. Find us on Apple and Podcast and Google Play, as well as Stitcher and a few more streams coming to you soon. So we appreciate you guys very much. We love you as always, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.